we're going to do several districts. The first district is House District 35, and that's incumbents Margaret Doherty and challengers John Goodhouse. And we got House District 37, and basically the incumbent is Julie Parrish, challenger is Hostika. I'm thinking we'll just have the incumbents go first, and so I would call Representative Doherty first. I don't see the folks from District 38, so I'm going to assume they're not going to be coming. So in which case, I've told the folks they have 4 minutes of presentation. I'll expand that to 6 minutes. I have a question. So Representative Doherty.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us again to the Washington County Forum. I am Margaret Doherty, and I'm the House District Representative from House District 35, which is Tigard, Southwest Portland. I was appointed in 2009 to the legislature when Larry Glizio left, and was elected in 2010. So I've been there about 3.5 years and up for re-election again. I'm almost a native Portlander. I moved to Portland when I was 9. My dad was in the military, and we ended up here when he was captain of the port down in Portland. And graduated from Wilson High School, worked my way through Portland State, got my master's at Lewis and Clark. I was a teacher, high school teacher for 10 years in the North Clackamas School District. And then when I left teaching, I went to work for the Oregon Education Association as a union representative for the next 22 and retired in 2006. So then very short, that's a kind of a nickel-dime story of where I've been. Some of the accomplishments that I've done in the legislature I'm very proud of, because when you go through and you're meeting with 60 people, and I've been in 2 sessions. One session we had the majority, and one session we were even. But I think the one thing that's very important was some of the bills that we did. Probably the signature one was one that I worked on with current Representative Bonamici, then she was Senator Bonamici, and that was the ABC, which is the Access to Business Capital. And at that time, it was extremely difficult for small businesses to get loans from the banks. They simply were not loaning. So this is a program that's been around in the state of Oregon for a number of years, at least 10 years, where the state of Oregon is actually giving them loans and helping them working with the banks. And it's a rotating loan fund. And this is a fund that we're proud of because it's got, I think, a 2% default rate, and that is it. Another thing that is very important is to work with what we call a CTE. And when I taught in North Clackamas, it had the best, and still has the best, vocational program in the state of Oregon. And what we've done, we worked with Representative Dembro to go through and deal with having more vocational programs back in the schools. Because I taught kids that ended up becoming plumbers and electricians and welders and fabricators and diesel mechanics, and they were those were the kind of jobs that they wanted, that they were very, very good at. But throughout the years, there's been less and less of an emphasis on it. One thing I did with the Tigard School District is, about 3 years ago, I was over at the Plumbers and Steamfitters Union, which is over in Tualatin, and they were talking about how they had called the school district and said, we want to teach the kids how to weld. And they had not heard back. And I go, for free? And they go, no. So I called the superintendent and I said, what's the deal? How come we're not doing it? He said, oh, we don't have the money for transportation. The Plumbers and Steamfitters Union not only got money for transportation, but the next year they had classes for a class of kids from Tualatin High School and Tigard High School. If you drive by any place like Fott Electric or Fott Steel down on 72nd, they are screaming for fabricators and welders. So that's another thing that I'm very proud of. I'm on the Healthcare Committee, which is extremely busy this year, and also the Business and Labor Committee. So in a nutshell, that's who I am. I've lived in Tigard for about 20-some years, very involved with the community. I've been on the Planning Commission since 2007, volunteered with the library for probably 13, 14 years, and continue to do so. Also on the Chief of Police Advisory Council, and we're looking forward in Tigard into the future with budgets, and I'm on the mayor's budget committee. So that's me in a nutshell.
On up. Mr. Goodhouse. You can take your full 6 to 7 minutes if you like.
Okay. Good afternoon, John Goodhouse. I'm running in Tigard. It is Margaret Doherty. I've lived in Tigard my entire life. I have 2 kids at Tigard High. Oldest plays varsity volleyball and basketball. Son's at Tigard High as well. He just went from JV football to varsity football. They have a great football team going on. Youngest plays volleyball. She goes to Twaldy Middle School, married. I've been in the area, I've coached sports, I've been in Boy Scouts myself, I've been a scout leader also. Very active in the community, volunteering in the school system. Just really love Tiger, it's the only city I know, but it's just a great area, great community. And people ask, why did I decide to run? A couple of issues is I'm on the board of directors for the 12th Chamber of Commerce and also on the Tiger Chamber. So I deal with businesses every day. And I talk to a lot of business owners who say, why do you say that? Why don't they understand what business owners need? They need people that really have run a business or been part of a business. They need people to understand that in order for a business to grow, businesses need a clearer tax code, clearer regulations in order for them to expand. Too many businesses are sitting on money, not wanting to expand or hire people because they're unsure of what's supposed to go on or what they can do. So in order to do that, rather than focus on bringing larger companies and so forth to the region, we just take all the businesses, the 100,000 small businesses, and each one hired an employee, we would have an unemployment problem with 170,000 people unemployed right now. The other area is education. I went through the Tiger school system myself, my kids are going through there, and the big thing I noticed is kind of going to one size fits all. We're losing the skilled labor, we're losing programs like financial planning, financial advising. We're also losing a lot of the arts and music programs. It's going down this one narrow program where it's basically you go from elementary, middle school, high school, college. It's almost like a conveyor belt. If you're an advanced student, they're getting rid of the advanced classes. Kids who need extra help, they're being pushed to the side. And I talk to a lot of people that have 3 kids, and they say it kind of falls this way, where middle kid is okay, but one kid's advanced, and they're not getting extra skills, and their kid's not getting the skills and they need extra attention. So we need different options for school choice, voucher programs, charter schools, options if someone's not getting what they need, they can go to an area. I can't tell you how many people in the district, after I've knocked 11,000 doors, that have said, why should I go to a private school and have to spend my money and also my taxes are paying into the school system? We need to give more options for our kids. We need to prepare them better. My day job, I'm a financial advisor, and I can't tell you how many kids don't realize, or 18, 19-year-old, they call them, they're still kids, but don't realize that they can have their own retirement account. They say, well, what do you mean I can have my own retirement account? Well, my employer's not for it. I go, no, you have your own retirement account. We're not teaching our kids financial planning in school. We're not teaching them the pitfalls of debt, or what compounding interest will do, or really prepare them for the future. We just say, go to college, you'll have a good future, you'll get a good job. But no one really knows what that looks like. I'd love to implement a program where before they go to college, they do like a business plan that business owners do. Business owners have to sit down with the bank and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do, this is the loan I have, and this is how I'm going to pay it back. And at least they understand what they're going to have to do to pay it back. Why shouldn't a child, before they go to college, at least go through a program, if they were to graduate today with that degree, have to figure out how they're going to be able to survive on income, if there's going to be jobs out there available, so at least there's some accountability to put on themselves. So education is really a huge part for me that we just need to focus and prepare our kids more for the future to understand what's going on. We need to focus on our businesses to get Oregon back working. And that's basically myself in a nutshell, just a dedicated area, been out there working hard. Kids in school systems, so I'm committed to the schools. Thank you.
Well, the soul of wit is brevity, so it's very witty. Basically 3 minutes and 30 seconds each, so questions for anyone?
Could I walk across here instead of right over there?
I think your PV credits are okay. Come over here. You're caught up on those. Good. So if you...
Mrs. Doherty, I've said this before here, but not to you, but you were part of that group that did put a big load on the businesses by the extra fees, $750 million extra fees and taxes in, I think, '09. This made a big hardship for businesses that had to cut their employees down, by a third or a half. We've heard them speaking here about people who have been running for office that had businesses that were having a hard time. And as far as education, I went to LA schools in the prehistoric days. We had everything, a shop in every school, there was a nurse in every school, a music teacher in every school. All this, even their cafeteria was not really like hometown buffet, but you had a big variety of entrees and other things, and they were at a reasonable price. Why are we so much in our schools today having so many things that don't help you be a good adult or to run a, have a good, just like Mr. Goodhouse said about the, knowing how to run their lives and everything. So just could you address that, please?
Well, I'll answer your first question. I was not in the 2009 session. I didn't get appointed until October to August of 2009.
Okay, that's good. Your position.
But when we talk about schools, and I think all of us can go back and look and see what the schools were like in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And in Oregon, what the difference was with this is that we had two things. First of all, we had O&C funds, which were Oregon, California timber revenues. Second of all, schools were run by local property taxes. The money did not come from the state. And so local property taxes were, local people were able to go through and set the rate. And when I went through and worked in schools, we had some rates that were $5.20 per thousand. We had some school districts that were $35 per thousand. And they had all of these kind of things. And when in 1990, after ballot measure 5, when it went back to the state paying for it, every time, since the state's revenue is personal income tax, every time the economy would go up and down, so did school funding. And so there really has not been a stable method of school funding ever in the state of Oregon. And that's something we really need to look at, is some sort of a stable sort of economy and funding that is not dependent just upon one source.
Well, about that, though, the schools have been getting a greater percentage of raise in their budget than what is the regular cost of living for the taxpayer. That was just.
Lawrence Raymond, forum member. I would like to hear from both speakers about this, what I think is a matter of considerable concern, and that is the lack of discipline in our schools. I think maybe that stems from the lack of discipline in the home. Way back when I was in school, the principal kept a rubber hose in his office. I don't think he ever used it. It was just knowing that it was there inspired a lot of kids to shape up and behave.
And I guarantee you, he probably didn't have it, but it was the threat. The one thing about this is the one thing that's different, and I think part of it is the parents, and I saw this change from age 74 to 84 when I taught. And I used to give parents a call and say, Michael's having a little problem or whatever, he's a little antsy in class or with a little bit of discipline, and the parents would be right there and working with the child and doing it. At the end, what it is you would give it a call and they would say, well, what did you do to cause my child to do this? So I think that's part of the discipline. The second thing are court cases that have been brought up about from parents of things you can and cannot do for discipline. For example, you can no longer use attendance as a factor in grading. And so if a student could be late every day, or they could miss a lot of class, and again, we cannot deduct from their grades for that. So I think what it is part of it societal, and part of it is just trying to deal with a great diversity of children.
I remember when my granddaughter was in 3rd grade, and she said, Grandma, I wish those other kids would shut up so I could listen and learn.
They did my class.
Well, I was going to say, what I've noticed with my kids in the school system, and it gets very frustrating, and my kids will come home and say that, I have a child that missed half the semester, and there's their attendance, and they want to have the homework in, and also in the last week, they stay up all night and turn the assignments in. Well, what does that really teach our children, and what does that really prepare them for the future if we're saying you can just show up for half the class and then wait till the last moment to turn it in? It doesn't work that way in the real world. We need to get back into our schools and saying, we have to change that. If it's been changed, we need to change and say attendance is a factor, and if you don't turn your assignments in, you're going to get marked down, and if you fail, you have to redo it. But just pushing kids through, just pushing through and having funding in our schools, it's not going to work anymore. And it relates into our job force. My wife tells me all the time, you have people come in that are 18, 19, 20, they're there for 3 months, they expect to be up in middle management, they expect, well, I'm not getting a raise. How come this didn't happen? Because they're so used to in schools, this to be handed to them, just given to them, no matter if they show up or not and work for it. We're to pretend that to our future and to our business, and we can't have that happening to our workforce. So we need to be stricter in there with our schools and our kids, yes.
Now, we'll translate into discipline.
I Hi there, I'm Marilyn Williams from Walton Valley Water District Commissioner. And I want to ask both of you if you would please give me your opinion of what should happen with the Southwest Corridor Plan that's going through in your area. Do you support it?
Well, the Southwest Corridor Plan, it not only deals with all of 99, probably from Sherwood all the way down to downtown Portland, but the Southwest Corridor Plan where it junctions at Capitol Highway and Barber Boulevard and the freeway is one of the areas in Portland that we're looking at very, very carefully. I'm on the Tiger Planning Commission. We've talked about high-capacity transit issues for about 2 or 3 years. We've been to a lot of conferences and talking about it. And when we talk about high-capacity transit, that's exactly what it is. We have absolutely no idea what sort of transit is going to be down 99, but at least we are next on the list to look at funding these kind of things. It could be rapid back bus transit, it could be light rail, it could be, hopefully by the time we get it done, it could be hovercraft, you never know. But those are the sort of things that we're looking at. The one thing they have done in high-capacity transit, and what you do in transit planning, is you go through and you have the stations before you have, what sort of method is going to get to those stations. And in the Portland area, we deal with retail centers, we deal with education centers, and I know that we're looking at a stop at PCC in Sylvania. We're looking at a stop in downtown Tigard. We're looking at stops. They even looked on 121st and Shoals Ferry, and that's kind of gone to the wayside. But they're also looking at the Tigard Triangle and those sort of things. So when you talk about high-capacity transit, the planning is there. The cooperation between Metro, TriMet, City of Portland, Multnomah County, Washington County, and Tigard is working very carefully together to go through and get the best sort of high-capacity transit we can find.
The big issue in the area has been whether or not light rail will come through Tigard. And in a recent interview with the Willamette Week, I was brought up to my opponent and I. And my opponent was in favor of light rail coming through Tigard and said basically build it and it'll come. I've been working a lot with the residents in Tigard of getting a petition together, so at least residents can decide if they want it built or not before that money is spent. And I believe the project, like $1.5 billion project through Tigard, it should go to the voters to decide if they want that or not. And also, by doing that, it encourages other thoughts and it makes the process a lot more streamlined by looking at alternatives such as bus rapid transit. Now, a lot more of the talk since this petition's been going around has been leaning more towards bus rapid transit now because they're realizing, hey, there's too much pushback on this. People don't want to spend this much money on light rail, and it's not going to fix the problem through the Southwest Corridor.
And I'd just like to make one thing clear. There has been absolutely no talk whatsoever about the kind of transit there will be. So I don't know where the idea is that, that I'm in favor of just having light rail down there, because there has been absolutely no talk about what the kind of transit it will be. That's another 6, 7, 8, 10 years down the road.
And Madam Board Member, this topic hasn't come up much in this entire campaign, but I think it's going to be important in the future. And it's about redistricting. This year, because of the 30-30 split, the legislature was golden and came up with a redistricting plan that didn't have to go to the Secretary of State, didn't have to go to the courts. I mean, it was a beautiful thing. But who knows in the future? So the League of Women Voters, Common Cause, and the City Club are putting together something on an independent commission. And I'm wondering what your opinions would be on having an independent commission in, what would it be, 2021, redistrict legislative districts the next time around. You get it?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I think there's been talk about this before, because to be honest with you, I don't know what the legal ramifications are and what legally we have written in, whether it be the Constitution or statute, as to what the process is. But as I said, this is the first time in 100 years that the process has worked without either going to the Secretary of State or the courts to come up with it. But I don't think there's a bad idea to go through and have an independent commission, but like every sort of commission, how independent can they really be? Because a commission is appointed by somebody. And so I think that that's really important to go through and get that kind of thing worked out. But as I say, from a legal standpoint, I'm not quite sure what we would have to do to change that process. But we have 10 years.
No, not 10.
9.
No. 8.
Well, being a candidate that has a pretty good disadvantage as far as voter registration, definitely it would be nice to look at it and find a way that each district was more based on the candidates rather than a vast difference in voter registration where a lot of times candidates don't even run because there's such a disadvantage So that is an area that does need to be looked at as far as breaking down these districts and trying to make them more even, so we get a better process as far as candidates coming up that we can vote on, rather than just districts that aren't even looked at because there's such a drastic difference. So I don't know if an independent source might be able to help on that, but where we do, we need to find a way to even out these districts so we have more of a competitive races and advantage.
Well, I'd be curious if you want to respond to anything. We're running way ahead of time, so 2 minutes each to close. We don't usually do that, but we have time. Would you like to?
Well, I think what it is I think with every election, it's so very important, and I used to get very preachy when I taught about the idea of making sure you vote, and I know that this is a very active and engaged group, so hopefully you've all turned in your ballots. It's kind of interesting just because today is the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote in the state of Oregon. And so, you think that it's kind of a long time, but it really isn't a long time process. And so I'm very, very, have always been very much of a person that says, you know, you don't have a right to say anything if you don't vote. So tell your neighbors to vote, everybody vote, and celebrate the suffrage that it took us. It took them quite a long time to get there, but in 1912, we got the vote.
To close off, the biggest thing I've been basing my campaign on, the biggest thing I hear from people is they want really someone that represents them, that listens to them. At the end of the day, they'd rather have someone tell you, I don't know, rather than just give an answer. They'd rather have someone that has an open door policy, someone that'll listen and at least consider their thoughts. I have so many supporters out there, people that are knocking doors, and they're saying, you actually stopped and listened to me, you consider this, or you say, you're not sure, or at least you're just giving a straight answer. And so many people really want that, and they're looking for that, and that's what I've been running my campaign on, and that's what I will do when I get done there, Sam. Thank you.
We have lots of time because we scheduled folks who didn't show because their district's not in Washington County, so like Oswego. So we actually have 5 to 10 minutes more. I take responsibility for that.
Why don't you go on to the other candidates and then see?
Okay, let's go to the other question. Okay, so we'll do a general question at the end. Okay, so we'll bring on this time incumbent Representative Parrish. Hold your questions till later, and you'll get a chance to ask them. Thank you.
Well, thank you all for coming out, and I know it's not quite as filled as the folks would like to have out here today, but it's a pleasure to be back out here. I'm Julie Parrish. I'm the state representative from House District 37, which is West Lynn, Tualatin, Durham, Stafford. Is the kind of main community. We've also got a little bit of River Grove and Marylhurst tied up in there as well. And so again, it is a pleasure to be out here. And you know, 2 years ago, whether by design or kind of serendipitous, the House of Representatives was tied for the first time in 152 years. And from that tie, we were able to get a lot of work done for Oregon, bills and new ideas that I'm very proud to have been a part of. You've heard a little bit about the redistricting piece, that hadn't been done in 100 years. And to the extent that it needs to be a committee, and I'm certainly open to that idea as well. But you know, you look at every newspaper in Oregon has basically said that the work of the last legislative session, when it was so closely balanced and the good ideas came to the surface and the kind of fringy ideas got put aside and shelved for 2 years, and people actually had to come and work together to get things done. Every paper, every media outlet has basically said this has been an unprecedented piece of Oregon's history, is this 2 years that we're just coming off of. So I serve in the legislature on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I'm the vice co-chair of Veterans Affairs, and of course in the House, because it is 30-30, everything is tied, so it's co-chairs and co-vice chairs and co-speakers, and there's a duplicate set of everything. But because of that, we've had to work really hard to work together. So I serve as the vice co-chair of Veterans Affairs. I also serve on the Healthcare Committee with Representative Doherty. I serve on the Human Services Committee, and I serve on the Education Committee. And 2 years ago, you know, somebody had said I'd be doing this, I'd be running for office. Somebody had sent me in 2010, you know, January 2010, you'd be doing this. I probably would have said they were nuts, because in 2010, early part of 2010, my husband was still in Iraq. So he just retired from the service after a 23-year military career. And when he came home from Iraq, about half of those soldiers came home to no jobs. That deployment still has significant joblessness. And now we've heard in the last few weeks that Oregon's looking at another deployment to Afghanistan in 2014, where 1,800 of those same troops who just came home 2 years ago will be leaving in less than 2 years' time, potentially, to go back over to the Middle East. And so when you look at that population, it's just one of the populations that is facing joblessness, where we have, that's one population facing homelessness, one population that's facing mental illness and healthcare problems, and then look at all the other populations that are suffering from those things as well. I think it's important to have balanced voices who are in the legislature thinking about those problems and how do we face them and how do we look to solve those issues. You heard John Goodhouse talk about 170,000 Oregonians who are out of work, and that number is a little low. It's probably it's actually a little higher right now. 170,000 people in an income tax state is about $500 million of revenue that we're not collecting because they're not working. And it's also pressure on the social service system when they're not working in terms of food stamp programs or any of the other programs that the government pays for when people have need. And I grew up in those programs, so I understand what they're like from the inside of those programs. You know, I was born in Oregon. I actually went to McKinley for my first grade year of school. We didn't do kindergarten then, but I went to McKinley just right down the road, so I was born in St. Vincent's. I'm an Oregonian through and through. My mom's family came and was in Oregon since before it was a state. I've got an ancestor who was a very early conservationist, botanist, who did a lot of work kind of classifying some of the plants in Oregon. And so we've got a long family history on the one side, and on my dad's side, he came to So as the 100th anniversary of the right to vote, from having you know, family that comes from a place where you really don't have the opportunity to vote, it's not lost on me to be here, standing here as an elected official, as a woman, as a, you know, a child of an immigrant, and being able to represent folks in Washington County and Clackamas County. So those things are very meaningful to me. When you look at then how do we solve these problems, it really does take working together. And in a time where we have really strong leaders, Co-Speaker Roblin, who's the Democratic co-speaker from Coos County, and co-speaker Hannah, who is the Republican speaker from Douglas County, and how well they worked together and the leadership that they brought forward and how they moved us, how they inspired us to go out there and solve some of these problems. In a tied House, when you have 30 Republicans and 30 Democrats, and it takes 31 people to move a bill, we really did have to work together. We really did have to find ways to solve those problems as a team, and so I'm pleased to have been a part of that. You heard Margaret, Representative Doherty, talk about some of the things we've done in healthcare. We are starting to look at how do we bend the cost curve in healthcare, and what does that look like in the future, and how do we serve people and make sure that there's better outcomes. The governor has hired Dr. Rudy Prue, who's come in and kind of started to shake things up on the education front. I'm very pleased with the ability and the potential that he brings to Oregon's education conversation. He's got some great ideas and want to go down there and continue to be a part of that. So in the next legislative session, if I'm elected again, you'll see bills that I'm working on with the Building Trades Union. We're looking at how do we do economic development and do infrastructure, and how do we pay for those things and get their communities back and working. And, you know, when you think about party, and, you know, we all have, you know, registered for a party, but at the end of the day, we're all Oregonians. I was an Oregonian before I picked a party. And I think that in this 2 years, when I kind of came out of left field, my own party didn't pick me, understand. So I had to kind of come and gate crash the wedding. I wasn't the choice for the House Republicans. But when you look then at 2 years of a history of building relationships and working across the aisle, I'm really pleased to say that groups that didn't support me the last time, groups that tend to not support Republicans as a general rule, have come over and said, you know what, we're going to give you our endorsement. So I've been supported by the Oregon Nurses Association, by the Oregon Building Trades Council, Stand for Children, the Oregon Business Association. Those are all groups that didn't endorse me the last time, that came out this time and said, you know what, you did a good job. And so I'm pleased to represent their voices also in the legislature as well. And it's been a great 2 years, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to be here to speak with you all today, so thank you.
Mr. Hostika, you've got your 7+ minutes if you choose to take all of it. Well, plenty of time for questions, so whatever that came up, the questions will be answered. Maybe not satisfactory, but at least for fun, pretty minimum.
So I'm Carl Hostika. I'm the candidate for House District 37, the challenger against the incumbent. Actually, most of my life I've been an educator and been a professor at the University of Oregon, but I've also been in public life, and people sort of ask me what's it like to be both a professor and an elected official. My answer is that as a professor or as an elected official, you get 4 minutes to address all the important issues facing the state. As a professor, you talk for an hour and a half on one subject. So,
I'm gonna give you 8 minutes, so.
yeah, okay, 8 minutes. So I'll try to cover about 1/6 of a subject. I think that gives me that time. I just want to go very quickly through what I think is at stake in this election, because I think that the district that I'm in and that Julie and I are contesting is going to be one of those races which is going to determine what kind of legislature we have and what are the priorities that the legislature is going to work on. And I think there are very big differences between the two of us, so we might as well just address what those differences are and then go to the questions. The first one has to do with our educational system. As Mr. Goodhouse mentioned, we're cutting programs in the educational system. We're taking programs out of our public schools that people have counted on for years, that we all enjoyed. Most of us, I think, are roughly the same age. We all enjoyed a free public education with a full range of programs. Those are going away. So what's our answer? Our neighborhood schools are cutting teachers, increasing class sizes, reducing programs. The answer that he gave us, and I think is one answer that is common to a lot more people than him, is we'll just make it easier for people to get their kids out of the schools. We'll give them vouchers. We'll have charter schools. We'll give them the right to go to another district if they're willing to pay the price. I think the other view is let's make the public schools good for everybody, so that everybody has the chance at a good public education. Then if they want to choose something else, that's their choice. But they shouldn't be forced out because the legislature is not funding our system adequately. Another issue then is the jobs question. I believe that we can create jobs by investing in our infrastructure, by training people with the skills they need to get the jobs that are out there. There are actually jobs right now in this state where people don't have the skills. The other side often says the answer to the jobs problem is to lower taxes, and primarily lowering taxes on corporations. What you find, though, when you look into it, is only 10% of the corporate income tax is paid by corporations that are headquartered in Oregon. 90% of the tax breaks that people would give in the name of economic development would go to out-of-state corporations. So I believe we ought to focus on investment in skills, investment in our infrastructure, our schools, roads and bridges, and create jobs that way. The next big issue that's going to come before the legislature this year, or perhaps next session, depending on how the governor wants to pursue it, is going to be tax reform. So what is tax reform? From my viewpoint, tax reform is making sure that we have a system that creates the revenue needed to provide the services that the people want and then distributes the burden in a fair manner. Tax reform is just not cutting taxes, which I think is how the other side views it. So those are the three major questions. There are other issues that are, people say that the legislature, you know, that's down ballot. It's not important. We look at the president, we look at the Senate, we look at the Congress. Why would we care about a state legislature? So I look at legislative actions around this country and see what's happening in legislatures around this country. And I'm, along with many of you, old enough to remember when a number of actions were taken to try to increase the rights that people have. I remember the Civil Rights Act, where we tried to increase people's voting rights. I remember Roe versus Wade, when we tried to increase women's right to control their own reproductive health. I also even go back to remember Taft-Hartley and the legislation that gave people the right to organize. All those rights are under attack now across this country by legislatures, not by the Congress, not by the president, but by state legislatures. So what we see is attempts around the country to make it harder and harder for people to vote rather than easier. We see attacks continually on women's right to choose. We even see states where they're trying to make it illegal for people to organize. I think that we have to protect those rights and we have to enhance those rights and not reduce them. The last thing I would say, which was interesting to me as I was thinking about coming to this and what would I say here, first question was, are there any undecided voters left? You know, so why are we doing this? Well, I stopped to get a haircut on my way over here, and the woman who was cutting my hair, I started talking to her. She's an undecided voter in Washington County, so I guess there still are some of us, and we still should be talking about it. The other half of the district, though, that we're running to represent is in Clackamas County. And it's no joke, but I did say this at a rally yesterday, which sounded like a joke, which is, if you're in Clackamas County and you don't know who you're going to vote for, don't worry, the county clerk will do it for you. I think that's the most reprehensible thing that's happening in our democracy right now. And it ought to be condemned by every person running for office, not only in Clackamas County, but everywhere. The other thing that we've seen throughout the state are occasional efforts to try to intimidate people. The police in West Lynn were called to try to stop people from doing what they're legally entitled to do, which is to pick up a ballot from a voter, register it, and take it and drop it off. So I think we have to fight hard to keep everybody's right to vote, women's right to choose, and people's right to organize. And when we look at sort of who's supporting whom in this race, I've been attacked several times for having support from public employees. My response is, I'm proud to be supported by the people who are doing the work, who are actually delivering the services. And if you want to attack them and make them the scapegoats, then I don't think our public services are going to improve. We need well-motivated, well-trained, and highly skilled public servants to deliver the services. So if there anybody left out there who hasn't decided to vote, I'm asking for your vote and hope to be your next state representative.
Well, we have a substantial amount of time for questions, so you want to sit up here, I guess you can walk back and forth. You can sit here, probably easier to get back and forth. Again, this is Washington County Public Affairs Forum, and questions are open to members. If you want to be a member, Pat Mayberry will take your check, and we'll thank you for it.
Thank you, John. My name is Chris Leslie, a foreign member. I've noticed a disturbing trend in politics that people think that they're a political class. I actually heard a representative of Congress call himself a political class. That is not very American to me. I grew up with, we are a civilian military, civilian government for the people. How do you answer these general questions about the political class atmosphere and how you're going to fight it?
Well, I don't think it's a secret that I'm probably not considered in the political class. I think some of the newspapers have put that out there for me, in that, you know, I just certainly don't fit the mold of being somebody who's a politician. And I do have an advanced prison directive with the state troopers down in Salem. I said, if I ever start to look like some of the people in the building, please feel free to take me out to the empty jail at Wampatuck. So, anyway, just kidding. But, you know, I think we do need to have fresh voices in the legislature, in all of government. And those voices have to come from a variety of sources. They can't just be people who got elected to some city council office and then have worked their way up the ladder, we do need new ideas, because you lose that fresh voice, you lose the eyes of, what's really happening at the ground level. I think there's two kinds of connected in government, in politics. There is the politically connected, the movers and the shakers, and who's your city councilor and your mayor, and you're active and you're engaged, and so these folks who are politically connected. Then there's community connected, and that's what I consider myself. The moms on the soccer field, and the person who bags your groceries, and the person who delivers your pizza, because I've got 3 kids in sports, we do a lot of pizza at my house. Those people, and you're engaged with those people, and I think people who've been in the process too long lose sight of who those people are. And that's who I go to Salem to represent, and that's the focus that I bring to the table. And so when I've lost that focus, my husband knows it's time to pull the plug, and I need to be gone. So that's how I look at that kind of politically connected, political class universe versus community connected, which is the boots on the ground, people who are going about the day volunteering at schools and making life work in their community. And they're two different people, and we don't ask enough community connected people to run. We don't go search for those people, we don't recruit those people, we don't look at that kind of community level and say that that's good enough for politics. Then the newspapers come out and say, well, you're not necessarily qualified to be here. I was just a mom last time around. That's what the paper said. So.
Well, I think that the question has to do with whether we're demonizing people because they've been in politics for a long time. And I think that's one of the most dangerous things we can do, because basically, and I see Chris Harker and Margaret Doherty and other people here who are serving in public life, we're not doing this to make a lot of money, so we're not a class, really. The thing that's good about Oregon, another one of my sort of throwaway lines, is the good thing about Oregon is the legislature only meets 6 months every year. And that's not because the legislature is a bad place, but it's because then legislators have to spend 1.5 years in other professions. And I think that's a good thing. But in the end, we'll go back to one of the original Republicans, Abraham Lincoln. This is the government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And it has to stay that way. It can't be looked at as something foreign and alien that we need to resist and control.
Thank you. Peter Rock, forum member. I have a question that really could go to any of the speakers today. We are electing legislators. So I would like to know, if elected, what legislative measure would you introduce or work hardest on? What do you consider the most important item that you could accomplish if elected?
Well, I think the single most important item all of us would say is funding of our basic public schools, because that's the basic responsibility of the legislature. It's the only one in the Constitution that says the legislature has to do it. After that, I'm looking at the tax reform issue, and I'm looking at trying to eliminate as much as we can of the loopholes that are in our tax system and try to make it fair for everyone.
No, I was going to say I was hoping to hear a specific measure.
I'm working on a bill right now. It was House Bill 4107 in the 2012 session. It was a bill that had bipartisan support. Senator Devlin, who's my Democratic senator, was also a co-sponsor on that bill with me. We're modifying that. We're working with the Building Trades Council. We've done some work with the Treasurer's Office and invited him into the conversation, or one of his representatives into the conversation. And essentially, what the bill will do is when a jurisdiction, city or county, when they do the economic development work necessary to bring new business to Oregon or expand and not just move Intel to Damascus, much as we'd like to have Intel in Clackamas County, that's not going to happen, but new or expanded, truly expanded business, when a city or county does that work, that they would actually get a revenue share with the state for that, for the specific purpose of infrastructure. So that's water and roads and sewer lines and things like that need to be done, not highway roads. So roads that run through either the county or the city. And again, that bill had bipartisan support in the last session. Didn't get a hearing. We'll go ahead and try to bring that forward again. We're also working with Senator Byer's office on that as well. He's come and sat into one of our planning meetings for that and has some interest in giving us some guidance on how to move that bill through the system. And we do believe that that would create jobs and it would help local jurisdictions look at their own barriers for job creation and then try to get to yes quicker on new businesses coming to a community or county.
I'm Bill Kroger, forum member. I was wondering if either one of you would like to talk a little bit about immigration reform. I know it's a federal issue, but if we end up with a gridlock Congress like we have for the last 8 years, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse. It's costing all of us a lot of money because it's not being dealt with. So I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, my first thought is that yes, it is a federal thing. There are things that can be done at the state level and some things that shouldn't be done at the state level. I don't think we want Arizona-type immigration reform in Oregon. But I do think that we can do things like give people the equivalent of a driver's license or a driver's license if they need it so that they can get to work and contribute to the society. We could give the children of immigrants the opportunity to attend our system of higher education as citizens and residents of the state. So there are a few things that we can do. I think that the major issues are going to have to be dealt with at the federal level, though.
Yeah, as a child of an immigrant, it's certainly an issue that is meaningful to me. My dad came here in the 60s. He came from war-torn Middle East. My uncle also came here later as a doctor practicing physician. He's a pathologist in Eastern Oregon. We've had a lot of our family move here from the Middle East, so I'm first-generation American. It certainly is not lost on me that we've got problems with our immigration system and that it is a broken system. I don't believe there's a lot we can do at the state level, and I'm going to continue to try to urge our Congress to fix this problem. I mean, people come to this country. If you think about who an immigrant is and why they come here, they are coming here for freedom. A lot of countries don't have the same types of freedoms that we have. They are coming here because they've been persecuted for their religion. My dad's from the Middle East. They are Greek Orthodox in a largely, kind of Muslim society. So there's a lot of persecution that happens for those folks. They are, very pro-family. They are very pro-job. They're entrepreneurs. My dad came here and built a business here in Oregon. That doesn't happen in some of these other countries, and so we do need to have pathways that get people here who want to be here and make sure that they're legal and that they, that there's a path and that the paths aren't years of red tape for these folks who want to come and truly be productive members of our state and of our nation.
Good afternoon, Mike Riley, forum member. I want to talk about the elephant in the room, and I'm not talking about the Republicans. Talking about the budget, and there's all this talk about the budget and the fact that we're having trouble meeting our budgets with the run-up in the budget since the mid-90s, double digits. Nobody's talking about PERS reform anymore. PERS reform and healthcare expansion have led to an amazing run-up in the size of the state government and virtually guaranteed the fact that we would be having and suffering from budget deficits and downturns now. So what's to be done about PERS reform, which by some accounts represents nearly a third of the education budget?
So there's this thought that somehow if you're a Republican, you just must hate public employees. That's just not true. My husband just retired from the Army this year. 23 years as technically a public employee, a military employee, but public employee. He did 2 tours in Iraq. Okay, that's 2 years gone from family. Last year, in 2010, a year gone from our kids. And he doesn't make the same money that the guy who's the school superintendent in whatever school district is making in PERS. We have got to do something about PERS, and it needs to be fair for the retiree, but it needs to be fair to the system. In West Lynn, we're looking at a $1.2 million budget shortfall, and PERS is the reason why. 27 cents of every school dollar before it'll never hit the classroom, is going to go straight out the door to PERS. And in this morning's Medford Mail Tribune, there was an article saying that for the Public Employees Union, that negotiating for PERS is not on the table. They would rather pick layoffs. That is not commensurate with the public good. That is not what my husband signed up for. When he was in Iraq and the government furloughed, they didn't go on strike. Payroll's gonna stop, and those soldiers don't come home. So I want a fair system. I want a fair system that looks at public employees across the entire spectrum, and not PERS, which is the 5th most complicated retirement system in the planet, and that quote comes right from the PERS office. So I'm very interested, Mike, in PERS reform and what that looks like, and how do we do it fairly, and how do we honor the people who have done the work, but not this just mantra of, we just have to keep feeding this beast, and it doesn't matter if it's where our kids are gonna lose school days, or if it doesn't matter if, the person who's a state worker in my district is gonna take more furlough days because we can't figure out the budget, because Mike Pilati gets $40,000 a month. My husband doesn't, take that home basically in a year, and for the same, well, actually for a lot more years of service when all said and done. So there's a lot of things we can do. Portland City Club has talked about this, and supporting the School Savings Act, which is essentially caps COLAs on PERS. I think we can do things like that. I think we're going to have to look at how do we do this from this day forward and make sure that it is fair for the people who do the work, because I'm proud of the people who do the work. I love my kids' teachers. My kids go to public schools, for the record, and my kids' teachers do a great job, but this constant, we're going to keep scraping money right off the top, and those dollars are never going to go to the classroom. They're not going to go to services. We're going to cut services in Westland's government because we can't solve a budget problem. It is time to talk about shared sacrifice and how do we look at PERS going forward.
So I guess we don't have to assume the Republicans are anti-public employee, but they certainly spend a lot of money attacking me for being pro-public employee. On PERS, I think everybody agrees we have to do something about PERS. All the principles that Julie mentioned, I also support. It's got to be fair, it's got to save money, and I believe it has to be negotiated between all parties involved, the taxpayers, the employers, and the public employees. There are small fixes, tax benefits for PERS employees who are actually out of state and don't pay taxes is one. Trying to recover from some of the investment fraud that occurred that actually hurt the PERS program is another one. If you want to talk about caps on COLAs, I believe that you can't make it so that somebody is permanently living in a poverty situation, which some of those caps would have. So PERS is on the table. It's got to be on the table. All parties have to be involved in it, and I'm willing to support fair and reasonable programs that actually save money.
Karen Boland, Forum Member. I had a chance to talk to Julie a little bit about this issue, so maybe Carl, you could go first. I know we need to do something about the money. I wonder what your position would be on a sales tax instead of an income tax. I know the voters have voted it down, but I'm just wondering what your, if we need more money, sure, putting people back to work is one way to do it, but we have all these guests that come to our state. Why not tax like the sales tax? So what would be your position on that?
Well, I think I'll address the whole question of tax reform under your heading there, because the first question was, that there's all these out-of-staters. The actual facts that we found, and I've been through this twice in my career, and I've been beat over the head continually, but I'm a tough guy. The amount of money you collect from out-of-staters essentially pays the administrative costs of instituting a sales tax. So the out-of-staters give you the sales tax. The major reform I would propose is not having a sales tax in lieu of an income tax, but and I have proposed these, is to look at it instead as a substitute for the property tax. Because it turns out that if you look at taxes in terms of their fairness, the property tax is the least fair tax of all. And that's because people's tax liability is unrelated to their income. You see, what we saw and what led to Measure 5 was a rapid increase in property values and property taxes while people's incomes were fairly steady or even declining. Again, a lot of people in this room have been through that experience. So I propose that that we tie the property taxes to people's income, which you could easily do, and then if you want to propose another tax, a consumption tax of some sort, and I don't think a sales tax is going to pass, that then it would be used to offset property taxes.
So the proposals for Oregon for sales tax have always been a sales tax and then an income tax on top of that, which I'm not supportive of. I do think we need to look at tax reform as a whole, but I also, look to some of the other states who are doing things differently and having a little more success than we are. So I'm a small business owner, or my business is registered here in Oregon. My business partner, who owns 50% of my company, lives in Wyoming. They have zero corporate tax, zero income tax, they have a marginal sales tax, they use their natural resources for job creation, they fund autism services for kids, they have a full school year, they have school nurses in their building. So here's a state, and their entire state is rural. So when we talk about all the issues around the metro, we represent the metro area, but look at all the rural concern that we have in Oregon. And so here's a state with a low unemployment rate, who has housing values that are going up. How do we look to what other states are doing and look at what tax reform really could mean? And, I just look at the disparities between our two states. We're both small states, we both have large rural concern, and their state is doing a lot more for their people than we are here. And so how do we look at that and how do we solve that? So I think, I went to the governor hosted a forum on an AOI, Associated Oregon Industries, held a forum on tax reform, and I'll tell you, it was, he didn't really say a lot. We keep hearing the governor's got a plan, and he didn't say a lot, but I'll keep watching for that plan, and I think you'll find that those of us who are down there really want to find ways to solve these problems, and I don't know what the actual outcome is going to look like, whether that, what kind of combination package that's going to be to get Oregon more stabilized with revenue.
When you mentioned that you were advocating for abortion, a woman's right to choose, I can't help but wonder, when that passed, the Supreme Court did not call on any medical volumes that were available in their library, but what happens when a woman has when she's pregnant? There are certain things that happen in her breast to accommodate that. Well,
I have a question. We have to ask a question directly of what they left for television time.
Well, I'm wondering who has been campaigning on the abortion issue? Just you? I don't know. I haven't heard anyone trying to do anything.
Lois.
So why are you including that?
If you haven't heard anybody suggest anything, you didn't read the paper yesterday. Even before the election, they're starting to talk about changes in the people's right.